Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss and analyze the recent announcement by President Trump where he has decided to pause the retaliatory tariff up to at least 90 days from now, and also on the other hand he has said that the tariff imposed on China will continue. There is no relief to China from the tariff that the United States has imposed in a series of steps in last 1 week. So what we can consider is that United States has shown a kind of double standard towards China as compared to all other major trading partners including India, because if you look at the tariff currently that India will have to pay just 10%, which is the base tariff. On the other hand, China has to pay a humongous tariff of 104%, which for all the goods that it is trying to export in the United States of America. So let us try to understand first of all what has been the announcement. Now obviously in the Truth Social, well, he had posted, Donald Trump has announced that he will apply a 90-day pause on the new tariff as his trade war continues to ripple across the global economy. And the effect of this clearly has been seen across the entire market, right from the US to Asia and even in India, where we've seen a significant fall and drop that has never been seen before in last few years. Now at the same time, Trump has revealed that he is even raising further by imposing another 21% of additional tariff on the Chinese good, bringing the tariff, or what you can call as the effective tariff on China, to be 125%, and that has further ratcheted up, or what we can call as the intensify the trade war between the two major economies of the world, that is United States and China. Substantially, at the other hand, reciprocal tariff, as we discussed, on other trade partners have been reduced to just 10%. Now, why Trump has decided to ensure that China do not get any relief from the tariff imposed? Now, claim by Trump is that the disrespect or the lack of respect that China has shown toward him or toward the United States of America. Because if you remember, when Trump announced the reciprocal tariff, he also has clearly stated that if countries do not retaliate, this will be the end. That means the US will not impose any further or any additional tariff apart from whatever is announced that day. But China has decided to retaliate and it imposed further additional tariff on the American export. And thus, what followed was a series of retaliation and counter retaliation measure, bringing the tariff on both American goods to China and the Chinese goods to America to more than 100% of effective tariff. So he has said that at some point, hopefully, he believes that China will also understand and will realize that the days of ripping off the USA, in his clear term he has mentioned, and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. And on the other hand, he also has said that if you look at the other countries, more than 75 countries, they have shown willingness to negotiate with the United States. They have shown willingness by calling and by having a discussion with the representatives of the United States, including the Department of Commerce, Department of Treasury and the USTR, to negotiate a solution. And taking that into consideration, that is why he is deciding to put a 90-day effective pause on the tariff barrier, and then also lowering the reciprocal tariff during this period to only 10% on the all 75 countries including India. So this is how we can understand the kind of double measures or double standard, you can say, that US is what you can call as showing toward the China. Now we have discussed the reason behind this is because of the retaliatory move by China. No other country had retaliated against the US tariff. So Trump initially, if you look at in the first week of February, the first week of April, 34% of tariff were imposed on Chinese goods, and that was swiftly made by counter retaliation when China also imposed the same value of 34% on the American goods, and then followed a series of measures and series of steps in which it has brought the standard tariff to 104% on China, and as per the recent announcement, further 21%, and thus today, the China tariff on US or Chinese tariff on US stand at 151%, while the US tariff on China stands at 125%. So on this chart, we can take a look at the steps or the series of steps in which the additional tariff was imposed by both the countries. So if you look here, in the beginning of the February, 10% duty was imposed by Trump on the Chinese goods, and then it brought the cumulative tariff to somewhere about 15%. Then again 10% extra tariff was imposed in March. Then 54% of tariff became cumulative because 34% of tariff was imposed on China in the April. Then 50% additional tariff was imposed, and then 21% of additional tariff was imposed. So right from beginning 10%, this addition has brought it to 125%. The similar kind of retaliation was shown by China as well, where continuously you have a tariff that is being imposed of 10 to 15%, then 10 to 15%. Again, a blanket tariff on all American exports to 34%. Then again, China put additional tariff of 50%, and that has brought it to the 151%. So that is how we can understand the tariff war has ensued between both the countries. Now, by putting an effective pause for 90 days on the reciprocal tariff on all other countries except China, what is the message that we should grasp from the American administration? Now, we can take a look at the messages, or what you can call as the statement given by the another officials or other officials of US administration, such as if you look at the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, he has said that the decision of all other major trading partners to not retaliate against American tariff is something which they are getting rewarded for, and the message is very simple and clear: do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. And that is what we can see, or what we can see is a 90-day effective pause has been put here. Tariff rate on Chinese goods has been raised due to their insistence on escalation, and this is something which is true because we have just seen in the chart how the measures of retaliation and counter retaliation has followed. Every country in the world who wants to come and negotiate, we are willing to hear you. And that is something which was also many experts were arguing when the Trump suddenly announced reciprocal tariff. He said that this is just a move to bring most of trading partners at negotiating table so that the US and these countries can finally have a bilateral agreement on how much tariff to be imposed. And that is why many experts also argued that the tariff shown in the reciprocal tariff chart will not continue for a long period of time. This is just a negotiation tactics being used by the Trump administration. Also, in the very harsh tone, the White House, what you can call as the White House spokesperson, Caroline Bennett, has said that when you punch at the United States of America, President Trump is going to punch back harder, and this is what is being reflected in the US policy toward China. Now, what has been the China's stance over the entire issue? So, if you look at the Lin Jian, who is the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry of China, he clearly has condemned in a very stark and harsh word the American policy of putting additional tariff on Chinese exports. China has placed resolute and forceful countermeasure, and that is why the retaliation on the tariff has been done here. China continues to take firm and resolute measures to safeguard our legitimate right and interest. It also has clearly stated that any attempt by the countries to harm China's sovereignty, security and development interest, largely by attacking its economy, will not go unanswered and will not be tolerated by the Chinese government. On the other hand, as a reactionary stance, again, Scott Bessent, who is the US Treasury Secretary, he has stated that they are the surplus country. Obviously, because if you look at the Chinese exports to US and US export to China, we can take a look at the chart here. Look at here, the US imports from China stand somewhere about $450 billion. That means China will have to pay additional, or American consumers actually, because when you impose tariff, the American consumers will have to pay. So American consumers will have to pay almost 125% extra as compared to what they used to pay, let us suppose, in the last year on almost $450 billion of Chinese import. On the other hand, the American import to China or US export to China stands somewhere just at about $130 billion. So almost 4 to 5 times difference you can see in the value of exports of US to China and export of China to United States of America. And that is something which has been reflected in the statement that they are the surplus country. The export to US are 5 times our export to China, and that is why they believe, that US believes, that if tariff war indeed ensues between US and China, China will be the biggest loser. And thus he has said that China also is the worst offender in the international trading system, and the punishment of additional tariff or the imposition of additional tariff then can be justified on this basis as well. Now, the trade war, we know that already it began somewhere in the beginning of this year when first time additional tariff was imposed by US on China. It has created what you can call as a looming slugfest, and the cast of dark shadow is something that looms larger over the global trade, because America and China, we can say, are the two major economies and has a very huge share in the overall global trade value as well as volume. Now, it has raised the specter of an American recession as well, because recession, obviously, if there is a situation of a higher inflation and at the same time if the growth does not continue and there is a continuous decline in the GDP growth rate, then both of the situation can create a phenomenon, what we can call as a situation of recession, which many even economists has went further and said that America can even enter the phase of stagflation, where we'll have the continuous rising inflation and stagnant growth, as well as rise in the unemployment rate. So raising the specter of an Americanization, that is the result of the trade war. What we have to understand here, that no matter how much tariff China imposes on America or America imposes on China, it's not that one country will be winner, other country will loser. Both countries in the end will come out to be loser, one to a greater extent, one to a lesser extent. So because in simple terms you have to understand that if America is imposing higher tariff on any export from any other country, finally it is the American consumers who will have to pay higher amount of money and will have to spend higher amount of money on that. So that is why tariffs are never good. This is the general message and the consensus on which World Trade Organization was established to create a rule-based trading system, which seems to have been completely upended after coming of the Trump, especially in his second administration. So China and US is toward dangerously what we call as a full-blown trade war and locked in an escalating slowdown. And the biggest problem is that none of the sides seems to be what you can call as showing a sign of backing down, because every tariff or the additional tariff is being made by retaliation, which is further being made by the counter retaliation. So there is also a risk of near total what you can call as the decline in the overall export and import between both the countries. And this is something we also have to understand, that when you use the term trade wars, because if you look at the newspapers today, a lot of time the trade war term is being mentioned, especially in the context of US and China. So trade war in simple term can be understood as a situation when one country retaliates against another country by raising import tariff or placing other restriction on the import. Other restriction can be what you can call as a blacklisting of certain countries which are not allowed to export or import items from one to other country. So both raising import tariff barrier or imposing non-tariff barrier can be an instrument in the trade war. Now this is not for the first time when the China and US has began to put tariff on each other. We have discussed that in the February month itself, Donald Trump began this war by slapping a 10% extra tariff on all Chinese goods with no carve out. That means it was a kind of complete blanket tariff. And the reason given behind this was clear. US President has claimed that China to some extent is largely behind fueling the illegal immigration and facilitating the flow of a dangerous drug on the American street, that is the fentanyl. Last month also he doubled those rates, a move that sent shockwave through global markets and deepened already strained US-China relations. The Biden administration largely maintained Trump's tariff. Talk about the pre-Trump this situation. That means, as you know, that in the January month, Trump took the charge of America as the 47th president. So before also, when Joe Biden was the president, the effective tariff or average tariff on the Chinese export to US stood somewhere at 21%. This was slightly higher than what Trump imposed in first term, which effectively was in the range of 19%. So you can understand the kind of change that we have seen here. From the 21% that was the average tariff, today China is being imposed 125% of the tariff. So such a huge increase is what we have witnessed as a result of the trade war, and obviously the effect will not be restricted to these two economies. It will spill over to all the other major economies as well, and can even finally result in a global economic slowdown. So that is all about this particular video. If you got the idea about the trade war that has ensued between US and China, the recent decision by the President Trump to halt for 90 days the reciprocal tariff except China, and the rationale behind this, I think you have understood and got a gist of. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it to fellow aspirants, as well as subscribe to our channel for more such helpful content. Thank you very much.